Right now, you probably think farming saved humanity. You picture it as progress. Fields of wheat, steady meals, civilization finally beginning. But the real answer is far stranger. For most of human history, you didn't farm at all. You didn't need to. Your ancestors ate better, worked less, and lived with more freedom than almost anyone who came after them. Then, around 12,000 years ago, something changed. And it may have been the worst decision your species ever made. Before agriculture, you were a forager. That word sounds primitive. It wasn't. Anthropologist Marshall Sahlins studied hunter-gatherer societies still living this way in the 20th century, and he found something nobody expected. These groups often worked only 3 to 5 hours a day to meet their needs. The rest of the time was leisure. Sahlins called this the original affluent society. Not affluent because people had more stuff, affluent because they wanted less, and got it easily. Think about that for a second. Less work, more rest. A varied diet pulled from dozens of wild plants and animals. No single point of failure. If one food source disappeared, there were always others. Your body was built for this rhythm. Move, eat, rest, repeat. Simple, sustainable. Then agriculture arrived, and everything narrowed. Farming meant choosing a handful of crops and betting your entire survival on them. Wheat, rice, maize. One bad season, one blight, one drought, and there was nothing to fall back on. Foragers spread their risk across an entire landscape. Farmers put all of it into a single field. Why would anyone trade a safety net for a tightrope? The evidence for what happened next is written directly into human bones. Bioarchaeologists George Armalagos and Mark Cohen compiled skeletal data from populations before and after the shift to agriculture, and the pattern was consistent across continents. Heights dropped. Skeletons show signs of malnutrition. Teeth reveal higher rates of decay, something almost absent in pre-agricultural remains. Farming didn't expand the menu. It shrank it down to a few starchy staples, and bodies paid the price. Disease tells a similar story. Foragers lived in small, mobile bands. Farmers settled down, and settling down meant crowding. Crowding meant waste, piling up near living space. It meant living close to domesticated animals for the first time in history. Measles, smallpox, influenza, all of them are believed to have jumped from livestock into humans, only after agriculture brought people and animals into permanent contact. Your immune system had never faced anything like it. So why did it happen at all? If farming made people shorter, sicker, and hungrier, why did it spread across the entire planet within a few thousand years? Geographer and historian Jared Diamond called agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. And his argument is uncomfortable precisely because it's convincing. Farming didn't win because it made individual lives better. It won because it produced more calories per acre, which meant more people per acre. A farming village could outnumber a foraging band many times over. Once that happened, there was no going back. More people needed more food, which meant more farming, which meant even less room for the old way of life. It wasn't a choice. It was a trap that sprang shut slowly, one generation at a time. Political anthropologist James C. Scott pushed this even further. He studied the earliest agricultural states and found that many early farmers didn't want to give up foraging. Some resisted for centuries, moving in and out of farming depending on the season, using it as a backup rather than a replacement. Full-time farming often had to be forced. Early states used debt, taxation, and sometimes outright coercion to keep populations tied to the fields, because a settled farming population was easier to tax, count, and control than a mobile band that could simply walk away. Agriculture didn't just change your diet. It built the first cages disguised as civilization. Here's the twist most people never hear. The population boom that farming enabled wasn't a sign of success. It was the mechanism of the trap. More mouths meant farming could never be undone, even once its costs were obvious. You can't feed 10 million foragers on a landscape that once fed 10,000. The door closed behind humanity, and it locked from the outside. So what would the world look like if that door had never opened at all? Population would have stayed small, probably in the tens of millions rather than billions. Cities, in the sense you know them, likely wouldn't exist. Neither would writing systems, since most early writing emerged specifically to track agricultural surplus and taxation. No grain stores to record. No need for the ledger. Empires require standing armies fed by farmland, so large-scale warfare, conquest, and the nation-state, as you understand it, may never have taken shape. Disease would look different too. Without dense, settled populations living beside livestock, many of history's deadliest pandemics might never have had the conditions to emerge. But it's not simply a story of loss. Without agriculture, you might not have antibiotics, vaccines, or modern medicine, all of which trace back to the surplus, specialization, and record-keeping that farming eventually made possible. You might not be reading this at all. There would be no writing to read. This is the part that should sit with you. Agriculture wasn't a straight line from worse to better. It was a trade. Health and freedom for population and permanence. Fewer calories in variety, more calories in bulk. A quieter, harder to track existence, exchanged for the beginnings of everything you now call civilization. And the strange part is, your body never adjusted to the trade. You are, biologically, still a forager. Your cravings for fat, salt, and sugar made perfect sense when those things were scarce and hard to find. Your instinct to move throughout the day, rather than sit still for 8 hours, matches the rhythm of a species built to walk, forage, and rest, not one built to sit behind a desk. Your stress response evolved for short bursts of danger, not the slow, grinding pressure of permanent settlement, permanent obligation, permanent work. You are, in a very real sense, a hunter-gatherer trapped inside an agricultural world. Every time you feel restless behind a desk, every time you crave variety in a diet built around a handful of processed staples, every time 3 hours of meetings leaves you more drained than a full day outdoors ever would. That's not weakness. That's 10,000 years of biology colliding with 10,000 years of infrastructure it was never designed for. Does that mean agriculture was a mistake? Maybe not in the way you'd assume. It's more accurate to say it was a fork in the road with no way back. Once population grew past what foraging could sustain, humanity didn't choose civilization. It became stuck with it, and everything since, cities, writing, medicine, the device you're reading this on, grew out of a trade your ancestors never consciously agreed to make. So the next time you think farming saved humanity, remember what it actually did. It fed more people, at the cost of feeding each of them worse. It built permanence, at the cost of freedom. It gave you writing, medicine, and civilization itself. But it also gave your body a mismatch. It has never stopped fighting. You didn't inherit a triumph. You inherited a trade-off, still running in the background of every meal you eat and every restless hour you spend sitting still.